D&D Out Loud with Ben Riggs. Episode 96. Mike Mearls and Gavin Norman.
Welcome assembled internet hordes to D&D Out Loud with Ben Riggs. I am Ben Riggs, the apparently still controversial D&D historian and author of Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons. Today, I am cosplaying Justin Alexander the Alexandrian. I hope that you appreciate my similarities to him. Over the past 13 years of writing and podcasting, I have met hundreds of creative geniuses in and around the world of tabletop role-playing games. Here on this show, I asked two of these flaming torches of the human imagination to come forth and have a fascinating discussion, which I then send out into the world. Today's conversation is one that has been long in the making and which I am tremendously excited about. I will begin with Gavin Norman, the impresario behind Old-School Essentials, which is lurking on the shelf behind me, a resurrection of BX Dungeons and Dragons that took the old school Renaissance scene by absolute storm. In many ways, it has become a true meter stick for the OSR, because if your rules can't do what OSE does, why put them out at all? You've had more fantastic Kickstarters than I can start, Gavin. I haven't even mentioned Dolmenwood. What do you want to say about Dolmenwood?
It's a kind of offshoot of OSE, I guess, but taking the BX rules framework in a different direction, like replacing a lot of the races and classes, most of the monsters, a lot of the magic with new fairy tale oriented content. So, yeah.
And well, thank you for being on, Gavin. And also joining us is a man with a resume that, again, it is difficult to summarize. I guess I'll start at the top with co-lead on D&D 5th edition. The more writing I do on it, I think it's also fair to say architect of 5th edition, because again, in my interviews, people keep pointing to a lot of stuff that you did early on. That really set the course for how the development of the game would go thenceforward. 5th edition is the best-selling, most successful version of Dungeons & Dragons ever created. It is one of the reasons for the golden age of tabletop role-playing games that apparently we are still living in. So don't believe anyone who says it's over. They were wrong. And with that, the man, the myth, the legend, Mike Mearls, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on again. Very excited.
So, again, having both of you on here at the same time, again, audience, I try to lay back and not make this into some sort of strange dual-headed interview. I guess my conversation starter would simply be, Gavin, you have to be one of the greatest living experts on BX, and Mike, obviously, you have to be one of the greatest living experts on 5e. Do you guys think that those... Pardon?
Roll initiative.
Yeah.
Roll initiative.
Are we rolling a D6 or a D20, right? That's the...
Which brings me to a conversation starter that will hopefully kick things off. Do you think that 5th edition and Old School Essentials are in conversation with each other?
I feel like... one thing I liked about the very early 5e development stuff that I was reading at the time, before the game was released, was this kind of idea that it would be a toolkit that you could kind of take material from any of the previous editions and plug it into your 5e game, potentially using stuff together even. And obviously kind of bringing things back to a quite basic old school kind of rules chassis that you could then use. So that was something that really interested me at the time. I feel like the way 5e panned out, probably largely the play culture, I guess, that aspect of the original design didn't really, come to the fore, or nothing much was made of it. But at the time, I felt like that was quite a kind of connection point.
Yeah, it was interesting from the design side. So the assumption we had going in to the 5e process was that the D&D audience was just scattered it was like the Tower of Babel. Like everyone has like this completely different take on D&D. And what we found as we play tested was that no, everyone was basically playing the same game. They were all basically playing 3rd edition with like this sort of 2nd edition sensibility. So what I mean by that is, and this is something which I think was fascinating to watch with the 5.5 evolution. People liked having clear, and I'm not going to say comprehensive, like, because they don't need the rules to be comprehensive. They need the rules to be comprehensive enough. And enough became like the art form of actually getting it right.
Right.
And so there was this funny thing of like, people would say, oh, we want to play all these different ways. And then you'd give them like one specific way to do things. And they'd say, oh, this is great. You don't need to give me anything else. And it was just sort of really interesting. Like, oh, okay, I guess that is enough. And I think people think that it's like this idea that when you have a very personal experience, those are also often the most universal. But we think, oh, only I have been through this because I don't see anyone else talking about it. So therefore, it's just really unique to me. And there's no, like losing, say, a parent is actually very, like when you talk to people who've been through it, there's a lot of similarities. And so I think running a D&D game could, is a bit like that. The interesting thing, though, and this kind of goes back to like the OSE thing of like, if like comprehensiveness, which is probably not a word, if we're to rate it on like a 1 to 5, like where OSE I'd say is like a 1, where it's like, look, it's not trying to explain everything. It gives you just enough to start. And then it expects you to fill, would you say that that's a fair description, like a BX OSE?
I mean, I just thinking about the whole scale of D&D-esque games, I would have put OSE more at a sort of 2.5. Like you can get a lot more stripped down.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I feel like OSE covers the basic stuff you need to run, like dungeons, wilderness, like building strongholds, character advancement spells. Like you can get a lot more stripped down. But yeah, it doesn't go into like massive detail on those things either, like 3.5 or something does.
Yeah, like I'd say like if you were writing an OSE monster, let's say I was just writing this monster this morning. Okay, a creature, or if you stab it, your sword might get stuck inside of it, right? You might write something like, okay, you make a save versus petrification. If you fail, your weapon's stuck. It takes an action and say you have to repeat the save to pull it free, right?
Right, yeah, or like, strength check or something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what we found with 5e. That's what kind of people wanted. Like that level was fine. Like they didn't need a lot more. But what's been interesting to see is like there is a school of thought that says, no. You have to specify the person needs to be within 5 feet. They need to be standing on the ground. The creature can't be right. And it's been fascinating to see that. That's kind of what we settled on was something that was like OSE-esque, but probably having a bit more detail, like especially in combat. And it's been funny watching 5.5 say, no, we have to do even more detail. And then I think really losing something in a way that's like, you couldn't point to any one rule, like in the game, that changed it. But when you look at the net effect of like all these extra paragraphs of rules added everywhere, you get a game that feels like a bit more like, oh, this is maybe more than I need.
Right.
Because I think that was the biggest thing I've learned, looking at like OSE BX is like, how much do you really need to tell a dungeon master for them to understand what they're supposed to do? Yeah. And is there something maybe like if someone needs a lot more information, maybe they shouldn't be a dungeon master, like, and that's maybe being controversial, but also like, when I think about, so I like Magic the Gathering. It's one of my favorite games. Like at some point, like, am I telling you how to build your deck, or am I just building your deck for you? And if I have to build your deck for you, should you be playing Magic? Like, should you be trying to make decks? Like, maybe you're just happier not doing that. So it's just one of those things I think is kind of interesting. Like to me, that always feels like that's the biggest takeaway I have from BX is it trusts the DM and doesn't try to assume you're going to like use the rules in this legalistic technical way.
Right. I remember in the early 5e as well, there was this thing about like natural language rules, right, which basically is what you're saying, right? We don't have to get like pedantically technical about everything. You can just describe in normal words what happens. I haven't really strongly followed 5e since the very early days, but do you feel like that's something that's been kind of pushed by the wayside a bit?
Yeah, I think the worst thing that happened to 5e was Twitter. there was a type of person, the type of person who needed everything like spelled out for them, naturally gravitated to Twitter, and then naturally started asking the designers lots of pedantic questions and getting very angry when they didn't have bulletproof answers. And I think that culture, which I think is just a relatively small subculture within TTRPGs, but it is, if you go through the American educational system and are trained that being right is just like the most saintly of like virtues, like then you kind of start thinking, I need to be right. I need to start answering these questions, and I need to start answering in a way that is consistent and always right. So I guess that's a don't tell my daughter this, but maybe that's a good way of saying, yeah, like don't take school any more seriously than you absolutely need to, because it might give you bad habits. So
right. Yeah, I mean that's quite a weird aspect, or a weird kind of influence on games generally, isn't it? This like hyper online, super critical kind of trolling kind of thing that, like, 99% of people who are playing a game are just at home having fun playing it with their friends. They might have the occasional like rules discussion, whatever, but they're not going to go online and like hassle the creator of the game. But I think from the perspective of the game's creators, you don't see these people at home. You see the tiny proportion of people like babbling us about stuff online, and then that can become an influence on future iterations of the game, because that's the kind of feedback you're hearing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I always felt it's like playing defense, which I think is a terrible way to be creative. Like you're trying to head off arguments rather than trying to do something interesting. So that does probably. So how would you characterize like the play culture on OSE? Do you feel it's distinct from like other flavors of D&D style games, or?
I mean, I guess I feel like it's a mix of like people who have been playing for years, playing since the 80s, and just want to continue playing the game of their youth, and a more modern kind of like OSR scene kind of player, who's probably dabbling in lots of different kind of old school-esque systems. So yeah, the people who are concerned about like, can I play keep on the Borderlands with this or the Isle of Dread, versus like, oh, I really like the layout and the clarity and this kind of like more modern kind of approach to things.
Yeah, so Ben was there because I ran OSE for a group of Ben's friends. Do you remember this, Ben? GaryCon 2024.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
they had only played 5e. How would you characterize their reaction to OSE as a rule set?
They were pretty hot for it, I would say. Again, a thing I constantly talk about is all the women at my work who are under 30 played D&D, and they all started with 5e. And I think this is still true. I think all of their non-5e experiences have been with me. I ran 3.5 for them for a while, and then Mike ran OSE. And it is interesting that like they do seem to pick out things from other editions that they definitely enjoy. One of them was quite enamored with the long skill list from 3.5. They're like, oh, at last. But the speed and simplicity of OSE certainly made an impression at the table. And again, I think 5e is very fast, obviously, but BX and OSE is faster. And I think that increased the fun of the event.
Cool. Yeah, I think it really depends on the DM in the end, doesn't it? If someone can run the system smoothly and can like, if there's a kind of lacuna in the rules comes up, can just keep going and make a ruling in the flow of the game, then that's great. If you get someone who's sort of fumbling over rule books and like has trouble kind of improvising or making rulings, then maybe a heavier system is better for them, because there is a like definitive kind of answer in the rule book.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance, because often going to the rule book is a fail state for the game. It means you're not moving, you're not playing, right? You're watching someone look through a book. But I will say, that brings up, that reminds me. So, what was the origin story for your approach to the layout of OSE? Because that's what I found wild about it as a product, as a book, is like I never had so much fun just flipping through. Like, this will make so much more sense now.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's somehow to do with the way I personally read and process information. I guess that, like, you know, I find the traditional like kind of wall of text RPG book sort of I don't know, I wouldn't say impenetrable, but unapproachable. You know, I know there are some people who can read a big column of text and quickly internalize everything and remember, you know, what they need to know, or can quickly like pick out things from a big paragraph. Personally, I can't. Somehow, like, I'm fairly slow reader, and like especially in the heat of the moment in the middle of a game, if I'm looking at a sort of chunky monster description, trying to find a bit of mechanics, I just my brain and eye are just sort of flipping all over the place, and I can't pick it out. So I kind of noticed this about myself, you know, trying to reference RPG books during play, and was like, I wonder if there's a better way to kind of present this information so that, you know, someone who processes information the same way I do can like quickly go to the, you know, down to a bullet point. There's the thing you need. You don't have to scan through this big paragraph. So I just started playing around with like the BX kind of rules framework, and like just trying out formatting it in different ways. Like, maybe I can fit all the combat rules on one spread side by side. So you know, to flip around, that, you know, there it is. And yeah, just kind of found that it was a super fun project, and for me it was a lot more usable, and a lot of other people were kind of interested in it as well, and kind of developed from there.
No, because it's fascinating you describe it that way, because I had not thought of this until you were describing it, and I was realizing how much easier it is for me to run OSE and Shadow Dark. I think in part because, especially the adventures, I burn so little energy referencing the adventures in play.
Yeah.
And, you know, I realized I have run, and I think it's from your the adventure compilation volume 1 you did. I forget the name of the adventure. It's the Jeweler's Sanctum or something like that.
That's great.
I've run that adventure 4 or 5 times, and I think part of it is, and I'm running it for I ran it for my daughter and her friends. I run it for adults, you know, and yeah, I didn't realize referencing it doesn't burn my battery down at all. I'm just flipping through.
Yeah.
And I wrote an adventure for GameholeCon a couple years ago, for I think for 2024. They asked me, could you write an old school style adventure? And I wrote it in a similar format, and it almost felt like cheating. Like, this is so easy. It's so much easier for me to write this way.
I'm not writing big paragraphs of prose. Yeah,
exactly. Like all this stuff where it's just here for that. I don't know who it's here for. But it was really great to hear, like, when people were running the adventures, it was an event they ran, it got really good feedback. And it's almost like I needed permission to start organizing stuff this way, because that's just my experience now with referencing rules reading. Like, I have so much trouble going back. You know, I mentioned before we went live, I don't know if you can notice, I have these empty shelves behind me, people watching at home. We're remodeling our house. We're getting some new flooring put in. So I have to move everything out of my office. And I was flipping through some of my role-playing game books, and yeah, like I was looking through a game that I played a bunch back in the day, but it's just, it's walls of text. Like, I don't know how I navigated this. Like, it's such an uphill climb. Right. And I still think it's one of those things that is very wildly underrated across the board in role-playing games, of just the like utility of how layout can do some of that lifting for you.
Yeah.
I just want to shout out for the audience. That was the Jeweler's Sanctum by Giuseppe Rotondo, which is in the first adventure anthology. Is that right, Mike?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, Gavin, go ahead.
A couple of aspects that come to mind is one I think is age, maybe. You know, like when you are in your youth, your mind is fresher and you just have more time to read, you know. So like, you know, I remember as a kid, I would just sit for hours and read through RPG books, you know, just as a like part of the hobby. I don't really have time to do that, you know. Now, you know, if I want to run a game, I want it to be like quick and easy to jump into. I don't want to have to spend hours reading it in advance. So I think that's one thing. I think I've forgotten what the other thing was actually, but
If you had a bullet point list, you'd have remembered.
right, yeah, exactly, yeah.
I mean, if it helps, we were on the layout of OSE and how Mike said that opening the rule book is a fail state and that the OSE adventures lighten that cognitive load at the table.
Oh, yes, yeah. The other thing I was thinking was that I think maybe there's a bit of a tradition of RPG writing as like creative writing, you know. Where I'm coming from is more like technical writing. And I think, you know, it has to have both aspects. But I think maybe the kind of wall of text style is a bit more on the very much emphasizing, you know, like creative, flowery prose, like evocative, flavorful stuff, at the expense of it being an actual like usable document kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm also sure, like, I mean, you're talking about like sort of architecting every 2-page spread. So in the process of building OSE, where they're like, basically, did you just start with like, okay, here are my combat rules. Here's me putting them into a 2-page spread. What's spilling over? Edit from there. Did you have a process?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, you know, some parts I would see like, okay, this just doesn't fit on 2 pages, no matter how much I edit it down. You know, okay, maybe conceptually I can extract a bunch of things into their own 2-page spread, which makes sense as a kind of conceptual unit. So that was part of the process as well, like figuring out what are the conceptual units of the game as well. You know, which kind of areas of the game need a page or 2 pages, you know. Like evasion is one in BX. Like there's actually quite kind of advanced or quite kind of involved like evasion rules for like, you know, you encounter monsters, what happens if you try and flee them or they try and flee you. You know, originally like the wilderness evasion procedure especially is quite involved. I think originally I probably had that or was trying to put that on the wilderness adventuring spread, but it's just too much. So this is a good example. So eventually I was like, okay, that doesn't fit. What if I had a spread that is for evasion? Okay, then I can fit the dungeon, the ship evasion, and the wilderness evasion all in one spread. Cool. So that's a conceptual unit. So yeah, it was a kind of long procedure of like playing around like that, seeing how it works, you know, to lay out.
See, that's fascinating because I'm in the process of creating my own game, and I've been thinking about layout, which is the thing that has me the most nervous because I don't do layout. But it makes me start thinking, okay, maybe that's the way. Yeah, that sounds like a good way to approach it. Like think conceptually. Like for instance, like so the game I'm working on it's derived from 5e. So combat
what?
rules.
Really?
Yeah, right. But like combat rules on 2 pages was probably there's probably too much going on there. But as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh well, I could see putting the rules for attacking on a page. I can see putting the rules for movement on a page. Yeah, and then for the combat section, might be like 3 spreads, but I might be like initiative. So like, okay, that makes a ton of sense. Because that is something that I think that really strikes me about OSE is how that book feels so useful, you know, and it just feels so. And it's kind of a funny way to put it, but it just feels so reliable. Like I would never use when I was a kid and I played BX, I never would have used the evasion rules because it was just a pain. But now I use them because they're right there.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, when part of the process of writing OSE was actually discovering a lot of rules in basic D&D that, same as a kid, I never knew. I never used. I never really knew they existed. Even, you know, they're in some kind of, you know, obscure section of the book or just a little mention underneath a table or something like that. But really combing through it, there was a lot of stuff in there that I was able to like pull out and like not like forefront necessarily, but like present it in a way that makes it more obvious that this is there. One thing I would potentially recommend actually is doing real basic layout. You know, you don't have to get into like the sort of design side of how it looks and fonts and all this kind of stuff, but just for your own use, just make a real basic layout with like, here are my margins, like, you know, heading 1, 2, and 3 styles. What can I fit on this spread? You know, if I want to fit, you know, you said you want to fit the attacking rules or something. Is that actually feasible? You know, can I edit bits down? just to get it kind of roughly, and then hand it off to someone to do the proper like design kind of layout. Could be an approach. You know, I do a lot of writing in layout for that reason, that like I find if you're writing in like a word processor or Google Docs, there's definitely a tendency to sort of ramble on and expand things, and then when you get it into layout, you're like, oh, we've got to cut this in half, and then it becomes a real major editing job, which is nicer to not have that in the first place, you know.
So is there a tool you recommend for someone like me, or just a TTRPG designer in general, who maybe isn't a layout person but wants to think this way? Like, do you go straight to InDesign, or is there a tool you can use as a
I mean, I use InDesign personally, but that, you know, if you're just doing kind of rough layout stuff, that's massive overkill. I think even in like Google Docs or like Word, you can set up your margins, set up your header styles. That's enough, you know, just to get a rough picture. You know, set it so it displays 2 pages side by side so you can see your spread. I think that, you know, just for a basic like overview of the layout, that's probably enough.
Yeah,
can I ask, are there any layout people that you would recommend to Mike?
Oh, like professional layouters. I guess I've worked with Vasily Kaliman, really good. Dice Sugars I've not worked with directly, but I've heard really good things about his layout work. Someone I've not worked with but really like is I don't know the person's name actually. They did the Painted Wastelands, which is an OSE kind of psychedelic Dreamlands OSE setting. The layout for that is super nice. Not sure offhand who did it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting to me because one of the things I'm doing, I use Word, and for my monster stat blocks, I hacked up this like table. I just made a table in Word and then just like got like my entries and cells all right, so I put my monster stats in there.
Yeah.
But that change alone has made designing monsters so much more fun, because I'm spending all my time thinking about like the fun mechanics rather than wrestling with like how would I put this? Seeing the stats as I'm going to use them when I playtest it gives me more confidence that what I'm doing is going to work, if that makes sense. Like right. A lot of my design has been like cutting stuff out and then finding, no, this actually works. Like I'm using the thing I intend to sell. I'm using this in play and it's working, right?
Yeah.
And that feels better than just being a list of numbers or something.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. What's the status of your game now? Like, how far along are you through development, and what's your kind of timeline with that, if you have something in mind? Or
the timeline's a little bit up in the air because I have some options for getting it published, and I'm trying to think: do I want to crowdfund? Do I want to do something else? The game itself is basically if I was to hand it to someone and say you can run a full campaign with it, the only thing they're missing right now are the magic items you find. So it has all the magic items you can buy because it's a 5e derivative, so you can buy stuff. It's got all the potions you can buy. It's got all the scrolls you can buy. It's got all the armor and weapons you can buy. It only goes to level 10 because I like the 5e engine past level 11 just doesn't work. Like it needs a massive overhaul to actually function. And the math gets just so completely stupid that I think if I do level 11 and up, I'm just going to change the math and say, look, this just doesn't run on the same rails as 5e. And I've got like the core 4 I'm really happy with, and then I'm really happy with the ranger and the monk. The warlock I need to change up a bit. The sorcerer needs a bit more work, and paladin, barbarian, bard, like I have ideas, but I don't have them fully built up yet. So it's playable. It's not feature complete, but it is like I'm actually working on monsters now. I have about 100 monsters designed, and I like to get another 100 done before I feel like I have enough here. But like the dungeon rules, like that's the big thing. Like, so I'm using some real-time mechanics inspired by Shadowdark.
Oh, interesting.
I feel like that's another thing. If you're looking at layout as one piece, like, okay, here's the information data you need to run in a way that now is like less work. Real-time mechanics feel like the next step up from that, where I am not tracking a lot of things now in play because I just have a timer going. I'm running an adventure right now. The characters, actually, it's kind of funny. The players met the ghost of this archmage, who's I thought was clearly evil, but they seem to think, well, he's giving us a job, so how bad could he be? So they're doing stuff for him in this dungeon, and so the way the mechanic works, every 10 minutes in real life, I roll for an event. And the number of dice I'm rolling goes up over time. You may have seen this, actually, Gavin, at GaryCon 24. You would have seen an earlier version of this. If you remember the dungeon with the
cool, yeah.
And I was rolling dice and leaving them out
through the portals and things. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I got the feeling there was some kind of mechanic going on the DM side of things for like different actions we were doing, triggering different kind of the dungeon sort of coming alive more. This kind of way.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So rather than have random encounters, this is more, there's a looming threat. So in this case, it's this elemental creature that keeps showing up. And they keep fighting it, and it only shows up for a few rounds. It's overpoweringly powerful. So that's what makes it kind of fun, is like they keep running, this thing keeps appearing and attacking them, but it only sticks around for like a round or two, depending on what I roll. But it keeps showing up, and it keeps getting more powerful as they're screwing up stuff in the dungeon. Because like when the guy who collects human skulls sends you to do something, maybe it's not a good idea, but I don't know. I said my players don't seem to care because someone told us to do this, so we should do it.
Plenty of nice people collect human skulls.
Exactly, right?
But
no, that's been the fun. That group especially, like they tend to, if they have a quest, they just stop thinking about why and just the how.
Yeah. Someone told us to do it, yeah.
Exactly, right. We're just following orders, I guess. In this version of Forgotten Realms, that's enough. Like that keeps us off the hook. They did like take orders from a Thayan wizard to go murder someone, and they did it. Luckily, that guy was also evil. He worked with Zentarum, but like at no point did they question, wait, why would a Thayan want this guy dead? They're like, the creepy guy without a head wants us to kill someone, so let's just do that because we were told to. So.
How do you find the real-time mechanics? So I've never played Shadow Dark, but reading the rules, that is one thing that in my mind is like, weird. You're not like you know, it's kind of crossing the streams of like time in the game world versus time in the real world. And like to me, I don't know, maybe I'm too much of a traditionalist, but I see that as a real divide that I wouldn't want to kind of mix. But I guess maybe in practice it kind of feels differently than it sounds on paper.
It is the classic TTRPG thing. It reads one way, then plays another. Because when I ran Shadow Dark, I didn't mean to use the torch timer. One of my players, who is like one of those God bless them players who actually reads the rulebook, said, "Okay, like let's start the torch timer." And I was like, "Well, since you insist, let's do that." And I never wanted to go back because the group immediately was like, "Oh, we only have an hour," which to me felt like that feels like forever. We need to be on point. And like they were so much more focused and like, "Oh, let's do this," and talking and like, and everyone, "Oh, what about the torch timer?" And it was so small to me, but it had a massive impact, right? We got through so much more stuff. So going to 10 minutes, it's a similar thing. I mean, 10 minutes is obviously a lot more frantic. I only run it when they're in the dungeon. So the idea behind the game is when you're in the dungeon, it's dangerous. And I think for me, the people I've run it for, it's worked well. And it's one of those things where I think the way I write and run games, like if someone was to say, "Oh, I don't like this, breaks like the reality for me," it would, I guess I would just be like, "Yeah, okay, fine, then the game's not for you." Right? Like but if you like the idea that there's these lurking threats, you want to start like, feel that pressure, that it feels dangerous, and especially the rising tension is what really makes it work. I think for me, the game I'm working on, that like these things keep getting worse the longer we're here. We can short rest, but there's like, okay, but then that's an immediate roll of the event, and it gets more dice and things like that. So I think it's that push pull between like the meta mechanics that acknowledge we're playing a game versus the immersive experience, and I think left to its own devices, if you removed all design from the equation, the game, my theory is TTRPGs would kind of look like they did maybe like 10 years ago when Pathfinder was the big game. These games that are written in this very detailed simulation focused manner, but are played as if they're playing BX or OSE, right? Like watch people play Pathfinder. And watch especially Pathfinder First Edition, not Second Edition, because Second Edition you really do need to use the rules. But Pathfinder First Edition in D&D 3.5, watching people play, they're basically playing BX, just with 4-page character sheets.
Mm.
And you know, like it's rare that I see, like, when people do dive into the minutiae of the rules, it's usually because they have a rules question, and the DM, to your earlier point, is like, well, I don't really know, and I don't necessarily feel comfortable just deciding. So let's look up what happens when, like, you're wearing plate mail and fall into water, right? And then you got like 3 paragraphs to read through to figure out what's happening. But I think, yeah, like left for own devices, most groups, like one thing I've noticed too is, it gets super random and specific, but it's been so consistent in my career. If you take a narrative designer or a writer and ask them, like, which system do you feel most comfortable with? And it's like a not TTRPG person or someone coming into it. My experience is that they'll ask for something that looks more like GURPS, where it's like, no, I want a reality simulator, because that's just
right.
You know, like it's very strange. Like, that's one thing I always thought, like, oh, if you're more narrative minded, you might feel more comfortable with a simpler
Something
system.
really lightweight.
Yeah. But what I found is actually with some of the more of a system person you are, because then you can extrapolate. You can be like, oh, okay, well, given, you know, opening a door in BX is like, you know, a 1 or 2 on D6. Well, okay, like to like break these chains, let's say it's a 1 on 1 D6, right?
Yeah.
You feel more comfortable. Whereas like the more literary writer people, like sometimes, no, I need something that, because I have zero domain knowledge. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if either of you guys have seen that, but it's just something that just kept popping up in my, especially when I worked on 4th edition. The number of designers who worked on D&D who couldn't design for 4th because they would literally flat out be like, but there's no spreadsheet that tells me, like, my guy, this monster has a strength of 18 and this size. Like, there's no spreadsheet that then tells me what its grapple check bonus is. Like, it was wild. But they needed it. It was so interesting. Like, and these are intelligent people. It wasn't like they were just like, oh, I know what I'm doing. It was like, no, it was a workflow problem for them.
On this note, I do wonder to what degree D&D is a necessary entry point for the hobby. Like, obviously you can come in and play tabletop role. You could start with Apocalypse World. But if you're the game master, I have a much harder time imagining a game master could just pick up Apocalypse World and be like, oh, okay, I get what's happening here. D&D is easy, frankly, for a beginner to pick up. D&D goes out of its way to make beginner products. And I wonder, like, my first game was Marvel Superheroes. But then I played a little 2nd edition after that. The first game I really played a lot of was Vampire the Masquerade, but still, like, I had 2 good years of marinating in 2nd edition, and then it was Vampire the Masquerade. So I really do wonder to what degree is D&D a necessary step? So again, and I know that's a slightly different answer than the question you were asking, Mike, but it's a thing I think about on occasion.
Yeah, I think so much is because so many people learn by playing, right? Like, you're that 4th or 5th player as a new player that someone pulls into their group. Great, we have 4, now we can play. And you're totally new, and then you're watching people run, because the chance that you go out and buy the rule book ahead of time are basically 0. And then you watch them, and it's like when you read, you know, some of these histories of the hobby, how much of it was, well, I watched people play, then I went home and wrote the rules I thought they were using.
Right.
You know, like, I used to, in board game development, you know, I haven't designed a board game from scratch in a long time, but it's like, oh, like, give people the components, and can they describe the game to you just based on the components? And if they can, then your game is on track. But if they can't, then there's something's off. And I think that's an interesting thing with role-playing games. Is like, I wonder how much of it, like, everyone would at the end of the day have a different comfort level of detail for the rules, just based on what they think they need versus what they actually need. Yeah, it's a fascinating hobby.
Right. I mean, that's an interesting thing as well, isn't it? In terms of rules complexity, it's more about perceived complexity, isn't it? Which ties back into what you were saying about 3.5. Like, if you sit down and you know nothing about the rules and you're playing in a game, it's your perception of what rules are coming into play and how the referee uses them that then forms the complexity of the rules in your mind. That may be completely different to when you actually look in the rule book what's in there.
Let me ask, sorry, go ahead, Mike, and then I was going to segue to Gavin's upcoming crowdfunder.
Perfect. So yeah, no, it was, you're saying that, it kind of struck me as like thinking my own experience, you know, when I ran BX when I was a kid, there was definitely a shifting point where I moved from it to AD&D that I think was in part defined by, like, how would I put this? Like, if I just take the BX combat rules and just play them like a board game, I think they're actually pretty dull, right? Like, I'm just moving a piece, rolling a die, seeing if I recorded some damage.
Right.
But if I'm playing like a role-playing game and discover, okay, the goblin comes charging up at you and he snarls like, I'm gonna eat your entrails for breakfast, and like then I roll the die and see I roll the 4. Oh, but as he says that, he trips and goes stumbling past you and almost cuts himself. Like, oh, this is super exciting. But like that layer of mechanic of like, okay, I rolled no damage, but then that turning into the narrative of, okay, the guy threatens you and then he makes a fool of himself. Like, there's no mechanic for that. And this kind of goes back to like the early idea of like Magic the Gathering, like, doesn't have rules for bluffing, right? Like, there's no rule for like, okay, I'm just going to swing it with everything and I have all my mana untapped and I have 3 cards in hand. And those 3 are basic lands, right? But like, you don't know that, right? Right? Are you going to block, right? Like, there's no rules for that, but that is like a hallmark of like a good player. Not only knows when to do this, and there's a certain level at which Magic stops trying to teach you, right? Like, okay, you know how the cards work, you know how the stack works, you know how mana works. We're done. We're not going to teach you. Like, we don't. Like, I wonder sometimes in the culture of role-playing games, there is, because we don't have the GM, the DM defined well, it is like Magic players complaining, it's stupid that someone can attack, you know, with all their mana untapped, with 3 basic lands in hand, and like that's a flaw. Like, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. When it's like, well, no, that's the game, that's the skill. Like, we have to accept there's a level of skill, and like how much of like unhappy RPGing is because we just don't acknowledge, hey, like maybe you could be better GM, and it has nothing to do with the rules. And like, how many people are actually even trying to address that, right? And at one point, there's like this old story. It was some baseball player, like Reggie Jackson or something like that. And someone asked him, Reggie, how do you hit a home run? And Reggie said, well, you just hit the ball really hard, really far, really fast, right? Like, what else can you do, right? Like, Reggie Jackson can't make me a home run hitter, right? Like we know there's a talent gap there. And I wonder how much of that is like are we sometimes just throwing in rules to try to cover up a talent gap, and it's like, is that actually fixing anything? Like, I don't know, right?
So Gavin, tell us about your upcoming crowdfunding campaign.
So it's for a OSE book called The Demonic Grimoire. So obviously, as OSE is originally based on BX D&D, which didn't have any devils or demons in it, I've always wanted to make, to bring those monsters from AD&D into the game. When we did the kind of advanced content in OSE, which is stuff inspired by AD&D brought into a BX framework, that would have been the point to bring in some devils and demons. But at that point, I kind of thought like, I could bring in like 10 or 15 stat blocks. That would be cool. But there's so much more to this, like, stuff about like summoning them, making pacts with them, magic circles. Are these like these demon lords and so on? Do they have cults and followers? Of course they do. It's like it's a whole big. What are there like demonic magic items? Yeah, totally. So it didn't feel like it would really do the topic justice just to bring in like 10 stat blocks. So this project has its origins in like 2020, but the last year we've really kind of developed it fully. So now it's a 176-page tome fully about like demons, cults, and evil magic for OSE. So it brings a lot of stuff from AD&D, not just like the stat blocks, but there was a lot of unraveling of like how the various sort of summoning magic works and like magic circles and things like that. Like, I found there's actually quite a lot of stuff really scattered through the AD&D books. Like, you have to dig into like at least 3 or 4 of the books to kind of piece together what's there. But it's what we've created is a kind of systematization of a lot of that stuff, and then it expanded greatly. So there's a lot of our own new kind of demon lords and monsters and stuff like that in there. So the book is pretty much finished. We're writing like the last 2 pages of like introductory material. This is April 19th, 2026. We're speaking here. we've got like maybe 5 illustrations still to come in. So like it's by the time the crowdfunding starts on May 6th, the book will be done, ready to go to print. Yeah, so it's going to be part of a wider OSE month on BackerKit, which is one of these like collaborative crowdfunding things. So the Demonic Grimoire is like the anchor project, and then around that we have 16 other creators who have all created a like demon themed OSE project. So we're all going to launch at once, and there's going to be like rewards, like if you back more than 5 of these projects, then you get a special extra reward. I can't reveal what that might be at this time, but like info coming soon, basically.
So
Now,
can I ask you? You go ahead, Mike. You go.
Does it include any adventures, or is that like part? Are you doing any adventures, or is that going to be part of the broader effort?
Yeah. So the Demonic Grimoire itself is purely like a rules source book, like a kind of basically a toolkit for adding like demons and cults to your campaign. So we decided not to include an adventure directly in that. We are producing a short adventure along with it as a separate product that ties in with demons in it. But the main idea is that the other 16 collaborators, a lot of those will be producing like demon themed OSE adventures. So like, I think it's a cool approach, that like if for a company to develop a source book, but then really you want like 10 or 12 adventures to go with it, but who has the time to develop that unless you're like Wizards or someone? So I think doing this kind of collaborative crowdfunding is a really good answer to that. We found a lot of creators in the OSE community to bring this like topic to the fore, all like working together.
I'm going to ask an obnoxious question, and I hope it's not too obnoxious. So, are the rules in any way morphed, added, or shaped such that like evil or fear or corruption or something is a part of the game if you're playing with a demonic grimoire, or is just as a demon just like another stat block like a dragon only with a cult or something?
Yeah, no, there's nothing like kind of mechanized fear or corruption or anything like that. I mean, I don't know. I guess personally, I've never played a game that has those kind of mechanics in like AD&D, which is where we were sort of deriving a lot of the mechanics. There's nothing like that. So, I mean, maybe there isn't like Ravenloft or something, but the like core AD&D anyway, there isn't. Some demons have a fear effect, but it's it's like the fear spell.
Cool.
Like,
Okay.
you save, maybe you run away. So it doesn't really add any extra kind of like core mechanics in that sense.
Yeah, as a Call of Cthulhu player of long standing, I'm always interested to see about the mechanical uses of evil creatures and things like that. But did you want to say something, Mike, or should I keep talking?
No, I was going to throw in too, if you like Call of Cthulhu, I don't know if you're familiar with the Vaesen, that's the free league like folk horror game. I love their fear mechanics because it gives players some agency. Like if you blow your fear check, you get to decide. It's like either fight, flight, or cower. Which to me, I love that game. I like that level of like control that you're giving the player to decide how they want your character to respond within a limited. Like,
I think one weird thing about adding something like that to OSE in a supplement would be that there's plenty of monsters in core OSE that equally could apply to, undead, for example. Like it would feel weird that suddenly demons have this extra kind of mechanic associated with them, which undead don't, so.
See, but this is what I love about OSE, because now it's like, okay, if I wanted to write those up, I could just use like something similar to their layout and do a page and then just have that. And I could just tuck into my rule book, right? That I could just use. And that's what's so nice about that entire the modularity of the system. Anyway, I'm sure.
Mike, I'm guessing that you've already received money from our audience, at least in terms of salary, if not royalties. But is there anything that the audience could pick up of yours that would put royalties in your pocket?
Oh, you know what? I could plug right now. It all fits together. It's all coming together. If you're like, hey, I want like a 5e style like book that has rules for fear and stuff in it, Cthulhu by Torchlight is available on D&D Beyond right now. You can go over and like a good chunk of that money goes straight into my bank account. So go buy 5 copies for some reason. If like, hey, I won't stop you. But I am literally, it's just really funny to think, oh yeah, that's right. I literally wrote this book. It doesn't have rules directly it does not use the sanity rules from Call of Cthulhu. There was some implementation issues around it working with D&D Beyond. We didn't want to put in something there that was very heavyweight that they couldn't automate. But it does use, inspired by Pendragon, passions, which are basically kind of like your driving traits. And when you meet the Cthulhu mythos, if you want to use these systems, you can essentially get passions that reflect a fear or a compulsion. So if you read the Necronomicon, you might get a compulsion, a passion to try to free Cthulhu, because that's just what the book's done to you. It's made you obsessed with this. So I won't object to anyone going out and buy it for every member of your family. Everyone should have their own purse, despite D&D Beyond's ability to share data. Why not just buy a copy for all of your friends? I'd be a big fan if you're doing that.
And
unless you can afford to, then please don't.
In case someone doesn't know, Cthulhu by Torchlight is Cthulhu Mythos for 5e, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, then I will say, Mike, Gavin, I cannot thank you enough for being here and taking the time to be on the show. Gavin, best of luck with your crowdfunding. Mike, can't wait to see your version of the 5e, your next version of the 5e rules. Thank you so much.
Hopefully, when I have more news about it, I will try to force you to have me on yet again, so I can.
Oh no! How terrible! And Gavin, I would love to talk to any of the adventure designers who are working on your demonic grimoire month over there, because OSE adventure writers tend to be fascinating, gregarious, and a ton of fun.
Okay, cool. I'll let them know. I'll let you know if anyone's interested. That's a cool suggestion.
The internet is hungry and needs feeding. But gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great to be here.